Hideo Kojima was born on August 24, 1963, in Setagaya, Tokyo, the youngest of 3 children. At the age of 3, his family moved away from the hustle and bustle of Tokyo, relocating to the western Kansai region, where his family continued to move from place to place, eventually settling in Kawanishi, Hyogo. Kojima said that he grew up as a latchkey kid, and it was typical for him to come home to an empty house and was forced to look after himself until his parents finished working. Staying alone in the silent house bothered Kojima, who became withdrawn and grew into the habit of always having a TV on when no one was around, a habit that Kojima admits to sticking to today when traveling alone in hotels. Kojima would describe his most intense, early memories from childhood as having come from dealing with death. "I almost drowned in a river once. I was attacked by a savage dog, and I nearly got run over by a train when I crossed a track." Then, at the age of 13, Hideo Kojima's father passed away. The death of his father put a strain on Kojima's initial dreams of becoming an artist or illustrator, as the social norms of Japan at the time put pressure on young adults to prepare for the future by gearing themselves for safe, well-paying jobs. Regardless, Kojima began writing short stories and sending them into magazines, but was never able to get anything published. Eventually, he began to try his hand at making movies with his friends, using an 8mm camera. His family continued to discourage his creative urges, something which he claimed made him feel even more desperate. Unlike his friends, he continued to pursue his creative interests, which he dreamed of being able to use to support himself with in the future. Eventually, Hideo Kojima entered college to study economics. As a college student, Kojima found himself using his free time to play video games, calling Shigeru Miyamoto's Super Mario Bros. And the creator of Dragon Quest, Yuji Hora's Portopia serial murder case as some of his major influences. In his final year of college, Kojima announced that he would be joining the video game industry, rather than pursuing his ambitions of becoming a film director. In 1986, at the age of 23, Hideo Kojima began working for Konami's MSX home computer division as a designer and planner. This was a development that was not taken very lightly by his peers and family. According to Kojima, at a wedding where he was asked to make a celebratory speech, he was introduced with, "This is Hideo Kojima, a man of great talent, which he's throwing away at Konami." Despite taking this financial and social risk, things did not pay off initially for Kojima at Konami. Having a lack of familiarity with programming, Kojima's gameplay ideas were initially overlooked, and he was additionally snubbed for his failures during his initial years. At one point, Kojima has stated that he almost left the video game industry due to this treatment, but ultimately, he stayed on. After working on 2 smaller projects for Konami, he was asked to take over a project called Metal Gear from a senior associate. The team was having trouble implementing the game's combat, but Kojima, inspired by The Great Escape, altered the gameplay to focus on sneaking. Metal Gear was eventually released in 1987. The game was a critical success on the MSX2, but due to the computer's obscurity in the American market, many Westerners did not play the game until it was ported to the NES, butchering much of the gameplay and changing several of the story details along the way. After finishing his second game, Snatcher, in 1988, 2 years later in 1990, Kojima released the sequel to Metal Gear, titled Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, for the MSX2 in Japan only. The story goes that after the release of Metal Gear, Kojima hadn't considered making a sequel. This was until one day on a train, he ran into a member of the Snake's Revenge development team, and after learning that the game he made was being given a sequel without his input, he went to his bosses to get his own true sequel greenlit. Unlike the other information here, I could not find any kind of original source to confirm this story, but at the end of the day, Snake's Revenge is considered a failure, and Metal Gear 2 was a critical success. In 1992, Kojima remade Snatcher for the PC, titling it Snatcher CD Romantic. This version was later ported to the Sega CD and translated into English, making it the only English version of the game. He followed this up with Policenauts in 1994, a film noir-style sci-fi adventure game, which was considered a spiritual sequel to Snatcher. Both of these games were hugely successful in Japan, but Kojima referred to them as his independent films compared to his blockbuster movie series that he would debut next. Metal Gear Solid released in 1988, becoming a smash hit around the world and instantly rocketing Kojima up to the level of international celebrity within the gaming community. As hype began to build on the inevitable sequel, Kojima went into development on what would become Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, while also beginning work on a side project, creating the Zone of the Enders franchise. After teasing the first glimpses of Metal Gear Solid 2 early in 2001, a playable demo was released with the first Zone of the Enders game, which fans flocked to and bought in droves. In late 2001, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty was at last complete. However, the massive hype which had been built for the game resulted in a massive backlash against a few of the game's features, including the length of the cutscenes found within, a confusing meta-narrative, and Kojima's replacement of the traditional hero, Solid Snake, with Raiden. This last one seemed to be the most vocal complaint, and it was something that nobody at the time expected, especially given that Raiden had not been hinted at pre-release. Metal Gear Solid 2 sold well, but did not manage to top the sales of the original Metal Gear Solid. Kojima's next project was Boktai, The Sun Is In Your Hand for the Game Boy Advance, which he served as the director on in 2003. Shortly after this, the first Metal Gear Solid was remade for the GameCube by a different team within Konami, along with collaboration with the studio Silicon Knights, to make Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, which was released in 2004. Solid Snake's appearance here would later go on to justify his inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Brawl 4 years later. In November of 2004, Kojima released Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. The game was critically acclaimed, with only the continued usage of the overhead camera being a common gripe amongst reviewers. However, the damage done by the controversy over the fan reaction to Metal Gear Solid 2 saw this game selling nearly 4 million less copies than the previous game. Before the release of this game, Kojima, at the age of 41, and after 18 years with the company, seemed to be straining in his position at Konami. As stated by him in an interview at the time, "I shouldn't say this in front of the management at Konami, but in the future I don't want to pay attention to money, demographic data, etc. I want to become freelance and create the games I always dreamt of." Kojima's last decade with Konami would see the releases of Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops in 2006, which he produced, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots in 2008, which he co-directed with Shuyo Murata, a writer Kojima had worked with within Konami for years, the announcement of Metal Gear Solid Rising in 2009, which was later retitled Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance and developed by Platinum Games, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker for the PlayStation Portable in 2012, which he directed, and Metal Gear Arcade, a Japan-only arcade cabinet, which was a coin-opted iteration of Metal Gear Online, which itself was based on the online mode of Metal Gear Solid 4. Kojima's final project for Konami would be Metal Gear Solid 5, which would take the form of Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain. Originally, these games were presented as separate IPs, with the Phantom Pain stated as to being handled by a Swedish company called Moby Dick Studio. Through a series of tweets and statements and interviews, connections between these two projects began to surface until March of 2013, when Kojima officially confirmed that the Phantom Pain was a Metal Gear project. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, a shorter game serving as a preview of the Phantom Pain, was released in 2014. Following the release of Ground Zeroes, conditions at Konami seemed to deteriorate drastically for Kojima, as well as the rest of the game developers within the company. As detailed in Super Bunny Hop's video, which Konami attempted to silence, restructuring and a fallout between Kojima and Kagemasa Kozuki, Konami's founder, were allegedly the basis for some of these changes. Directed by Kojima, PT, the playable teaser for Silent Hills, was released on the PlayStation Network in August 2014, hinting at a future collaboration between Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, and Norman Reedus. In April of 2015, Silent Hills was abruptly cancelled, resulting in Konami permanently removing PT for download. Soon after, word began to spread of Kojima Productions being consolidated with other studios and renamed, giving Konami reason, weak as it was, to remove Hideo Kojima's name from the box art of Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. The Phantom Pain was finally released in September 2015, marking Kojima's final Metal Gear game. A month later, on October 9th, a departure ceremony was held for Kojima, as his peers and co-workers gave him a cheerful but emotional goodbye. Currently, Konami is claiming that Kojima is simply taking a vacation, ignoring evidence of his goodbye party publicly, but I think it's fair to say that the writing's on the wall. Please note that this is partly my speculation, because as of writing, nobody knows except Kojima and Konami. But I will say that typically, non-compete clauses and contracts like Kojima would be under not only limit one's ability to work with other parties, but also to discuss the nature of their current employment until the contract has officially finished. If for any reason it turns out these reports were false and Kojima is still with Konami, I'll admit that I think this would be a shame. Hideo Kojima turned 52 years old in August this year, and if he continues with Konami next year, it will be his 30th year with the company. It's currently unknown what he's going to work on next, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he were to finally pursue a career in directing films, which has been his burning passion for the last 40 years of his life. Wherever he goes and whatever he does, I'll be interested in seeing what this remarkable man will do. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like my stuff, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I have a Twitter account which I post to pretty regularly. You can follow me there as well. Bye-bye!